jokes. You think that's funny?
No, I thought you're cracking knees.
What? What is that? The what?
Yeah, he needs a moon.
That's the only way I'm going to get one.
Didn't you already see it there?
No. It's the only way I'm going to see it, too.
Okay. Whatever.
So, maybe not all of you are familiar with what we do at this time. This is a period for open discussion, questions, whatever anyone wishes to raise. Then we'll entertain that, possibly even entertain ourselves. and we have about an hour to do that. So the ball is in your court.
So I have a question. I have a question. Anyone can answer. When Lama Michael, when I'm trying this method of focusing, resting, focusing, relaxing, what I find my mind does on the relaxed time, well, it wanders. It wanders when I focus also, but wanders more. But I have developed a habit of, in the so-called relaxed time, contemplating positive things. Like, may everyone in here be attaining awakening, or going to I have memorized so many short texts, so those will just start coming. And I'm wondering about that now. Is that, I'm just wondering if it's, if I'm not really letting myself relax, or it's just fine and dandy, or that's maybe a good alternative to just let the mind rest and go, la.
You can't do both.
Can't do both what?
Relax and recite. Is that what you're doing? You're reciting, right?
Sometimes reciting, sometimes more just contemplation on loving kindness, or contemplation on all beings.
Yeah.
It just kind of goes there because of all the retreats and such.
Yeah.
But you're saying relax while I do that?
Well, we always say relax no matter what you're doing.
But I
So
never
I guess
relax.
The answer is yeah.
Okay. I don't feel like I relax.
Really?
I don't know what it is. Seriously, I always feel like I'm on.
How about experimenting? So can you divide whatever you're reciting, can you divide it up into smaller chunks?
Yeah, it's pretty small. I mean, I'll just take a line.
Yeah. So you can recite a line, which maybe goes out on one breath.
Okay.
In other words, you don't have to inhale and exhale to get the one line, just the one line, and then stop, relax with that, and then start another one. So you bring your awareness fully to the line you're going to recite,
Mm-hmm.
and whether it's written and you're reading it or whether you've memorized it, and just try it.
Yeah.
And the shorter it is, the more likely it is that you will not be distracted in the period of the recitation.
Okay. I think my question is probably also, what is relaxing, since I always feel like I'm doing the shamatha, I'm doing the relaxing,
Yeah.
I'm doing the recitation, I'm trying to relax, which doesn't seem
Yeah.
like relaxing.
No, trying to relax,
It's not
not so
it.
good.
Yeah.
Where did I put my book?
Where'd you put your book?
I had my
Oh, there's a little book there underneath,
No.
that little white one. No. I don't know, do other people have trouble
look at that.
relaxing? Like, you feel like, yeah, okay, I'm not the only
Yeah, of
one,
course.
good.
I was thinking you were the only one. But
Yeah, me too. I want to clear that up first, my specialness. Let's get that
Yeah.
out of the way.
yeah.
Okay.
It's one interesting thing about what you just said is that recently I was, oh, you have my book. Oh, thank you. Thank you. 2 or 3 months ago, I was talking to this man who, in the conversation, he made a distinction between relaxing the body and relaxing the mind. He was not talking about ordinary mind. He was talking about the actual, not the physical part that we call the mind, like the brain. He was talking about the mind as a separate entity. And that was very interesting to hear. You rarely hear that, even from practitioners, to make the distinction between relaxation of the mind and relaxation of the body. And mostly, if you look at our text and read them, you see like the relaxation of the mind is held to be, but I think this is not quite right, but it's held to be the relaxation of the mind is held to be a natural result of complete relaxation of the body. That's not my experience, but I think that's what is normally held to be. Like if you relax your body, the mind relaxes. Or, in a certain sense, even worse, there's no distinction made whatsoever. But I think that it's possible to relax the mind as a separate thing from the body. So that raises a whole bunch of other issues, doesn't it?
Yeah. What would that
That's
be?
good.
How do you do that?
Why would you think I would know? I mean, I think you relax the mind. I think a large part of relaxation of the mind occurs within the context of Vajrayana practices, where you visualize things and you visualize their activities. And their activities include stillness as well as other things, which someone who practices in that tradition, they'll see all the things that happen in the context of relaxing the mind. But I've never seen it talked about as relaxation. It's just a factor in it, is that the mind settles naturally. under certain circumstances. So part of the things that people do in those, in the Vajrayana is they establish those circumstances, and then the mind settles. In the same way, we could say, well, totally different.
What else is
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's not critical. Maybe this is it here. I like reading the ninth Karmapas pieces. First of all, I think it's clear that the instruction for us is you relax the body. And if you relax the body carefully and thoroughly enough, the mind also relaxes, because the two are like intimately connected. So that's the starting point. Then the relaxation of the mind later, this is my experience actually, so it may not be that it would exactly match what the Karmapa would say, but my experience is that you relax the body, the mind relaxes at a certain point. And it takes more relaxation, and then the mind relaxes, and then you engage in certain practices that require that state of relaxation. And so then they unfold in a different way. But that's not what we're working on today. That's a whole other realm. Generally, the distinction between the mind relaxing and the body relaxing is not made. Very few people will make that distinction. Maybe even fewer people would know what they meant if they did make the distinction. But clearly, the body follows the mind normally, not the other way around. But I think in order for that to be a fruitful approach, we have to be at least able of seeing the difference between the relaxation of the body and the relaxation of the mind. Let's see, what was that? Is that what I was going to say, or was I going to say something else here? Maybe I read all these this morning. All of the things that I was looking at over the last couple of days, all of them had to do with planting the seed of a still mind by virtue of what we were doing mentally. Like sustaining non-distraction for the amount of time it takes to eat a mouthful of food or a swallow of sip of tea, or recite one round of the mani. And he also made the point like one mani, like Om Mani Padme Hum. That is could be one session. You could say it slower or faster. Om Mani Padme Hum. Then you just put your complete awareness on that. You recite it. Om Mani Padme Hum. Relax. And maybe after a minute or two or three, Om Mani Padme Hum. You could sing it, a phrase at a time. Place your awareness there, let it rest. Pretty soon it becomes automatic. And when it becomes automatic, you see exactly what it is that's happening, why it is that you're not distracted when you recite, in this case, the mani, and why you get distracted when you step outside of that session into another session. Then it's easy to get distracted. Make sense? Who are you looking at?
Is it okay to ask a question on that now? Okay. So when you're talking about the stillness of body and stillness of mind and what is relaxing, what came to mind with me is it feels like a mistake I often make if it's happening in the periphery, but if I look at it, I'm clear. But if I don't look at it, I can equate relaxed with stillness, as in feet up, leaning back, visibly still. But when I think about it, relaxing to me means it can be very, very active. And so then I have to ask myself, well, what is the stillness, or what is the relaxing? And where I come toward is it's not grasping, it's flexible. But it can be very active, but the physically or mentally active,
Sure.
but I'm thinking if not only I often confuse the definition of relaxing, but maybe others do too, and that it's not physically still, it's just, and then I go, well, if it's not physically still, what is it? And then it's flexible or not grasping to past or future, but trying to stay open.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's just where I've gone with it. But if I just look peripheral vision, I can catch myself equating relaxed with physically still.
It's all right. It's all right.
But that gets in the way of, because we can't live on the cushion.
Why?
Maybe some can. But I'm wondering. So then the question.
You're on the cushion right now. You're alive.
Yeah, and my mouth is moving. Yeah.
That's easy to fix. I mean.
But
I mean,
I also think there's a benefit of being relaxed while we're very active. That there's a use for
relaxed
that.
while? What?
Well, yeah, in the midst of being active.
Active, yeah. Of course there is. And it's like some people can jump off high cliffs into the roaring surf. But they didn't do that on day one. Or at least the ones who didn't come back up. So, so this is in a certain way, it's parallel. When we first get the instructions for our meditation, we often hear, do not be distracted. It's some kind of an injunction, right? Like, do not be distracted. And of course, because we want to be able to follow and learn how to meditate, we therefore say, I'm not going to be distracted. And that fundamentally, because the mind tightens down, no water can get into the sponge. Even though you're underwater, distracted all over, we can have the mistaken perception that we're not distracted. When actually, we're so distracted, we can't see the distraction. That's the other end of it, right? So I don't think that's where you are with it, but I'd believe it if you said you were, but I don't think that's it. I think it's more start out with our goal here is to be able to rest the mind, the awareness, whatever it is you're looking at. We want to rest it. We want to be able to see what we're doing, or even read a liturgy, that tells us in more detail what to do without being distracted. And our first approach can be a kind of like bravado. I will not be distracted. So you basically squeeze the sponge down so tight that the juice that comes from the practice can't get in. You basically locked everything out. And that's what we don't want to do. And so many of us do it, that the Karmapa's expression is really quite on the mark. When bringing the mind to rest, if you tighten your concentration too much because you want your mind to settle quietly, that will be a catalyst for more thoughts. I mean, anyone who's tried this more than 3 or 4 times already has had that experience, even if they couldn't name it. It's pretty clear. You insist on not being distracted, you will be distracted more than you ever believed. At the beginning, you should think, I am going to rest in the meditation only as an impetus. In other words, I'm going to follow the instructions, putting the mind like this and so on, but I'm really just doing it to maintain the momentum of learning to practice. Kind of like your mother or father are pushing you down the street on the bicycle, holding you up. And so what you are doing is just kind of steering a little bit. You're kind of getting the feel of it. You're not actually riding the bicycle. Someone else is taking care of that. And so that I think is what he's talking about here when he says, you want the mind to settle quietly. That will be a catalyst for thoughts. At the beginning, you should think, I'm going to rest in meditation only as an impetus, so that the I'm going to rest in meditation is not the whole thing, because if that's the whole thing, you're going to fail. So therefore, I'm doing it just as an impetus, just to kind of keep the whole thing warmed up somehow, keep it moving, but it's not it yet, so that we learn to relax right in the middle of it, which is more important in the beginning than whether or not you're distracted. At the beginning, you should think, I'm going to rest in meditation only as an impetus. During the actual practice, you should not have the thought of intending to meditate. Do not even think, I am meditating. Well, this is a higher order instruction, because it so easily can come to a sense of tenseness. To begin with, you should try to sustain non-distraction only for the amount of time it takes to eat a mouthful of food or swallow a sip of tea. That's a very clear instruction. It should be. If it isn't clear, then we should talk about it, because the idea here is that you reduce the size of the meditation session to where you cannot fail. Your parents are holding the bike up. You're totally confident. They're not going to let me fall. If they do, you'll never trust them again. It's kind of like they are looking after you. You're confident of that. That's happening. So then you relax naturally. If somebody says, now relax, actually that kind of makes you more tense. It feels like you're being tricked. The instructions, I think, are great. The mind is not to be found through searching. I mean, there are so many methods for looking for the mind. Looking for what we call mind itself. Not just our experience of things, which we might call the mind, but mind itself, which is the source of all mental phenomena. So then he says the mind is not to be found through searching. It is not seen by looking. If examined, it is found to be non-existent, which is to say, you can't find it. And at some point, you're convinced it is not to be found. If grasped at, in other words, if we think we found it and we grasp at it, it cannot be held. If examined, it is found to be non-existent. If grasped, it cannot be held. If dismissed, it does not go. If placed, it does not stay. If mixed, it does not blend, and so on. All of that adds up, in my experience, as you actually are not in charge. You want your mind to do what you want it to do? Good luck. Someday, try to meditate. Because meditation is not about getting your mind to do what you want it to do. It's actually witnessing the mind doing what it does, not necessarily what you want it to do. And whatever it does, it doesn't do it so you'll be happy. We've all proven that to ourselves over and over again. Do not intentionally think, and do not deliberately not think. In other words, it's like removing all of the exits, closing all the exit doors. There's nothing to do here except be present with what occurs, whatever that is. And then he says also, do not let thoughts go on their own way. Like, look, don't just let them have their way with you. That's a problem too. And do not deliberately not think. Do not remain indifferent. Do not let the thoughts go their own way. Do not follow the arising of your feelings. Now, all of that said, there are practices for each one of those things that actually do exactly what he's saying not to do here. But it is in a larger context of practice than what we're looking at right here. Here we're dealing with shamatha. So we have to remember shamatha is fundamentally developing the skill to just step back and allow the mind to just settle. And sometimes we're actually settling the body, not the mind. Other times we settle the body long enough, the mind settles too. So it's if you get too tight with this, you end up being yourself tight. You just, the real thing there is much looser than what we ordinarily are. Okay, let's see. Show me. No. Oh, you have to get a micro. She's going to bring you the microphone.
Were we ready for another question? I wasn't sure.
Yes.
I don't know.
Sure. All right.
Good.
So my ego says that this question is stupid, so I'm going to ask it. And I think you've been touching on this along the way, but as somebody who's been doing shamatha for just a little bit over a year, I guess I'm really curious, how do I know it's working? Like, how do I know I'm doing it right? How do I know that, how does one know?
You have no sense of that now?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think
Good.
it's working.
Yeah. So where does that come from? Where does that thought come from? I think it's working.
That's a good question. It's hard to pin down how exactly I know it's working, but I think it is. What you were saying about, maybe it's what you were saying about earlier about being so distracted you don't know that you're distracted. Now when I sit, all I can see is the distractions going all around me.
Yeah.
So, which...
That's all you can see? Do you talk to them? Or, what do you do with that? Do you just sit and feel the vertigo as it spins around, or what?
It depends on the day. Sometimes I just watch them like a news ticker.
You what?
So if you're watching the news,
Yeah.
like you can see the show, and
Yeah.
then there's the news ticker.
Oh, yeah.
So if I'm watching a spot on the floor, or that's the main show and everything else is the news ticker. But other times then you get pulled off and then you have to come back. And so Yeah, it's been a difficult question for me to be able to pin down exactly how.
It's actually a really good question, of course, because we're human beings, and I think it's fair to say, as human beings, we share more with each other than we imagine. We all think we're really different from everybody else, but I think we probably share more than what we don't share. And one of the things is that we generally do not like to put a lot of time and effort into something that bears absolutely no fruit of any kind.
True.
So the issue is around shamatha, which we each ask ourselves regularly, why am I doing this? What do I get from it? Should I be doing something different? And so on. And one of the test for that is the simplest with shorter sessions. So if you try to have a session that's an hour long with no distractions, probably you won't succeed. Even more important is you won't even be able to determine how many distractions were there, like how thick the flow of distractions was. And so you don't really have a way of telling yourself, till I'm making some progress. But if you narrow it down to one sip of tea, you can probably be successful more than half the time. Maybe 9 times out of 10 even. One sip of tea goes fast. If you've got your mind onto the sip of tea, just when you take the sip of tea, it's almost certain you did it. And then what you need to do is just expand it, which is simple also. You just drink more tea. Little by little, you'll see. And that's the advantage of the short session, is you can see it. You can see it growing. And it's comforting in the sense that, oh, I see how this goes. This is just the way that I trained myself to be distracted, exactly the same way. So now I train myself in the other direction. And it's probably going to take a long time to be really good at it, but on the way there, it can also be very pleasant because you find yourself still more of the time. The stillness is critical.
It's also hard.
You what?
It's also hard
What is?
being still.
In what sense?
For me, I have a body and a mind that like to roam and my mind makes a lot of thoughts and my body likes to fidget.
Oh. You're the only person who's ever said that.
Well, I work at an ADHD clinic, so.
This is everybody's issue. You know, it is just everybody's issue. To be able to sit down a very long time ago, like 30 years ago, Kala Rinpoche sat down and he wanted to inspire the group of people that were sitting in front of him. He was not giving an instruction, though that's what we thought he was going to do. That's not what he did. Instead, what he did was he talked about shamatha. He talked about the benefits of shamatha if you could hold your awareness for like 3 minutes, relaxed, without the mind wandering off everywhere. 3 minutes. I can't remember what 3 minutes was. 3 minutes was like, you know, a rough number anyway, since they didn't have clocks. So it was a rough figure, just a little short period of time. And he had the kind of the benefit that goes with that short period of time, if you can do that kind of regularly. And then he had maybe half an hour, and then an hour, and then a day. It went all the way up to 2 weeks of no distraction, just sitting still. And he ate and drank and all, but no distraction. And to just go to the extreme edge, the result of that was he's sitting in Sonada in India, in the Darjeeling area. He says the result of that is If someone is coming to visit you on that day, you already know who they are and when they'll get there. So it wasn't much in terms of instruction, you know, but it was just one of those things that made you think in a certain way, like, who cares? What do you get from that? Are you any less confused than anybody else by virtue of knowing who's coming to see you? But I think he also knew, it's like we wanted something that would make us feel like if we could accomplish this, that would be worthwhile. So my guess is he didn't think that was very worthwhile, but you wouldn't have to know too much about us to know that we think that was really worthwhile. So this is it's a long process. It's a long process, and it should be an enjoyable process, a joyous process even. And of course, it can be. If it wasn't a joyful process, not very many people would do it. Though you could sarcastically look around and say, not many people are. And you wouldn't be too far from the truth. But I think worldwide, the number of people who practice and get the results that are intended is quite a lot of people. Is that enough? We okay?
Thanks.
Sure.
So I don't know if this is helpful or not, but maybe I'll see what you think. Having asked myself that same question over time, I think that, well, what Lama Mike, what we did this morning was really helpful, I think, but a lot of it is that you're just seeing what's there, and I think that my tendency would be that all that was there is not okay, but it's there. You know, it's what's happening in my head, or what I call my head. You know, my mind. It was what's happening in my mind, and I'm seeing it. And it's like, I think that it's for myself. It was easy for me to think, at least in the beginning, that when I meditated, it was supposed to be quiet. It was like, well, why do I think it's suddenly going to be quiet? It wasn't quiet before. So I think that over time, like there's instances when it's quieter, but it's more often it's noisy. But it's being okay with the noise, sort of, you know. It's, I guess an example I'll use would be like at the old house, before I was the teacher upstairs, even with the kids, I'd be sitting downstairs, maybe Omze, and I'd hear them thumping around, and I'd be, oh, I wish they weren't thumping around. And after a while, part of me said, why is that different than any other noise? Why is that different than the noise that I would hear even if they weren't thumping around? So a lot of my practice has been just being okay with what's there. And then it's it's like those demons with Milarepa. They finally get tired of being nasty when he doesn't care anymore.
We had Julie's class yesterday on dying and death, and one of the exercises was to imagine a good death, and then to imagine a bad death.
Say that again?
It was to imagine a good death,
Yeah.
and then to imagine a bad death.
Oh, yeah. Good.
And the imaginings for a bad death were horrific. The participants shared what they imagined, and it's hell realms in detail, really, really terrible. And so I'm trying to figure out why in the evening I have a hard time practicing. And I'm looking at that. And I think that there's a way in which fear is a factor. And I don't necessarily, I'm not motivated by fear, even though these terrible, awful things and all the ways that people can suffer and the darkness of it and the brutality of it and the hatred of it is terrifying. It doesn't motivate me to practice. It's more of a distraction from practice.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions on how to work with that?
How to work with the terrifying aversion of the description of the hell realms. In order for it to be terrifying, I think we have to believe it. But here is where there's a bit of a departure from our Judeo-Christian thought on hell realms, or just on the hell, whatever. I was once standing in an area in San Francisco speaking with a very learned and smart Tibetan Lama, and we got started talking about the hell realms. And at a certain point he said, "Oh, I see the issue. You actually believe they're there." And that spawned a whole other conversation. So what he was saying was that we're not talking about a Christian hell realm, which if you have done certain negative things, it's like they're like getting things ready for you, you know, as if you were going to a hotel somewhere and they're making the bed and putting the mint on the pillow and all. But here it's like it's this terrible thing and it's being prepared for you because you are so bad. And so this Lama was saying, that's not the hell realms that we talk about. What we talk about is there is no such thing as a hell realm. It's like tonight you're going to have a dream. You actually don't know what you're going to dream tonight, in all probability. You don't know what you're going to dream tonight. But maybe if you're the kind of person who has a dream every night, you know there's going to be a dream. Right? You just know there's going to be a dream, and high probability of a dream, and that you'll have that experience. But you would never say that somebody or some buddies are preparing that dream for me, so that when I get there, I'll have this dream. You just would never say that. And that's the nature of the hell realm, according to from this one Lama. Like, the hell realm appears when you are born into it. In that moment, there is a hell realm. Before that, there was none. And after that, when your experience of that realm disappears or goes, then there's no hell realm. The hell realm is basically an experience. It has no reality beyond that, kind of like a hallucination. The hallucination then is based upon our activities, and due to the truth of interdependence between our thinking and our emotions and what we react to and in what ways and all, due to the independence of those things, then we have the experience of hell realms. But even when we have those experiences, they are as fleeting and impermanent as anything else is. Does it make sense? Or do you think you're being fooled?
It makes sense. And,
Yeah.
and I wonder about being fooled.
Yeah. You wonder about what?
Being fooled.
In which direction?
Not that, no, it makes sense, and I appreciate the thought and the answer. Gosh, there's just such suffering, and we see it and we hear about it, and it feels real, and it happens. It happens to people
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And it's scary that it happens all the time.
Right. But it's in this, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about here. If we're talking about the hell realms in a Buddhist context, then we really do have to look and ask the question, is this meant as a description of places where I would have the feeling that it was real? And the answer is, yeah, of course. Because we do that all day long, every day. We see something on the other side, somebody on the other side of the street, and we suddenly feel a sense of fear, and so we cross the street not to be on the same side as that person. Maybe there isn't any, the person could be a saint, and we would still cross the street. So it's not like it's connected necessarily to anything in the solid world. I think that's the important piece. From the Buddhist perspective, there are whole categories of Buddhists, just like there's categories of all sorts of things, who actually do believe in the solidity of the hell realms. So, being the cynic that I am, in case you didn't notice, I choose not to believe that. We all do that in a certain sense. We decide which teachings we're going to imbibe and in which we're going to be teetotalers. I don't think I like that one, so I'm not taking it. And we also go not just on the basis of whether we like it, but how much confidence we have in the person who says it. I don't, and it goes the other way also. It's like I know that if somebody tells me something about Buddhism and it totally does not make sense to me, I generally will say nothing to that person, but I'll have no confidence in what they say about things. So this is just the real world, how it unfolds. I think the real world looks, at times, much worse than anything the Buddhists dreamed up for hell realms. So I don't really need to conjure that up any more than it already is. I'd rather have the sense, which I kind of do internally anyway, that most of the things that I think, most of the things that I'm angry at, that I'm attached to and want to have or get rid of, most of that stuff seems pretty clear. It's flotsam and jetsam, kind of in the river of interconnected things. And that it isn't any more than that, which doesn't mean it doesn't scare me sometimes, or it doesn't make me want to go out and buy an ice cream cone to just take care of myself. But when we come back to sitting here in front of people, I feel like, the thing that I relate to more than anything else is, I believe that you have dreams tonight, or that you have dreams, and that those dreams do not occur until you fall asleep. They're not being constructed by carpenters and all the rest to make these things. It's just, you go to sleep, you have a dream, you wake up, you don't have it. Maybe you have it 10 nights in a row, maybe you don't. But it's mental phenomena. And it is not necessarily a reflection of anything beyond that. What do you think? You think, therefore I'm not?
Yeah, I think, therefore I am not. I've struggled with that same question so many times. And
The hell room question?
yeah, and came out of fundamental Catholic childhood. So, that was the eternal hell thing. I mean, if you do these kind of rather silly things, like in the old days, eat meat on Friday, mortal sin, hell forever. Even 6 years old, I thought, what? I mean, not common sense, But everyone caught in this fear. Then when I was about 14, they changed that rule. So then I thought, well, what about all those people that went to hell? So I became a lawyer. I became a lawyer. I think I was already lawyering it. Like, we got to do something there and get them out, give them dispensation, but they wouldn't talk about those folks. Anyway, that's all an aside. But no, not really. It kind of.
Is that why you became a lawyer?
No, he's Jewish. He came different. A different hell. Buddhist hell, Jewish hell, Catholic hell. Anyway, well, now I'm thinking, my dad told me this great story when I was about 15 and thinking, this whole religion's just a little bit not believable. And I said to him, do you believe in hell? And those were the kind of questions you never asked, but I was 15 and he and I were alone. And he said, no, I don't. And I was shocked all this time. Everybody runs around acting like they're believing it. And my dad just needs a direct question. He says, no, I don't. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, now think about it. He said, I've got some guys who I consider enemies, but I wouldn't even put my worst enemy in there for one day. So, and then he said, and I think God has to be a little better than me. So that sprung me. It was like, okay, I don't got to believe in that or struggle. But that's an aside. The two things I was thinking, Judith, when you asked is, first of all, not every meditation or teaching, like think of the best death, think of the worst death, not everyone is going to be useful to all of us. But when a teacher is up here, they give a wide range because they're showing the whole medicine cabinet if they can, or they're showing more than one remedy, right? So here's cough syrup, here's aspirin, here's Tylenol, here's some heavy opioids, whatever. And the person has to decide which of these I take. So for me, even though, as Lama Michael says, we can kind of be slick about it and just like, I like that, so I use that, and I don't like that. But sometimes we're very wise about it. Like, that one is not for me. It does not spur my practice. It harms my practice. So I just put it over here, That's fine. Someone else, really, that's going to work so well for them. And it's going to lead them to practice. Like they say, your hair's on fire. So, but that's not mine, just because of everything I'm bringing to the party. So that's one. But the other one I use is, it's back to the way we generate bodhicitta. So if someone has that mind and they suffer from it, and I can imagine them being my sister, brother, kid, mom, who I love, I want them free of that. So then I can think of things like, there's one prayer by the first Panchen Lama. It's basically, may I get the joyous effort to the level that I will want to go into the deepest hell to get my mom out. May I get that? I don't have it now. It scares the bejesus out of me. But may I someday be able to do that? So that's how I use those scary things. Like, scary things are around in my mind, in that person's mind, the guy today. There's been another shooting, guy today, you know. And those folks are running around in a hell-round mind. So they have to get their guns and kill these enemies. But may they be free, so I can use it like that. And then I can back out. Because it's just, to me, like the shamatha. How many breaths can I take before I'm distracted? How long can I think about hell before I'm in it? Which isn't going to help anybody. So it's the being the doctor to our own mind, our Buddha nature, and then getting help from teachers. I don't mean like me, but teachers. Yeah. So that's how I think about it.
Your name is Hannah, right? So you mentioned to Hannah, one of the... Heather. At least I didn't call you Rebecca. Heather, that part you said as a postscript almost, or at least that's how I interpreted it, part of the reason we do this, or one of the outcomes or stopping grounds, a rest stop along the way, is that we get joy. You mentioned the word joy. I wondered if you could share with us some times that you felt joy from practice.
Joy in the context of this particular lineage is one part of what we call the four immeasurables. And the joy is also an immeasurable. It's meant to be an immeasurable as a practice. And the immeasurable aspect of it is not immeasurable joy. It is the joy that you have for immeasurable beings. And therefore your joy can be as small as it is, and it can still be immeasurable joy because it's the focus is what's relevant. Once in another meeting with another teacher, I got an instruction for immeasurable joy, for practicing immeasurable joy. And the instruction was, in order to, I asked him, like, how do you do this thing? You know, I seem to have, open the tap all the way and it just drips out. Not much going on. And he said, you should go every day into some place where there are people and connect with those people. Connect with somebody there. And connect with them through practice without telling them anything. Like do not include them in the secret, as it were. Just go and engage with anyone you can basically put your finger on, or just engage. And while you're engaging, hold the view that you are having a secret meeting with your mother, who is no longer living, was not living then and isn't living now as far as I know, but and so imagine that your connection with her brings her great joy, and then imagine all beings in the world are like that, and through her you are actually bringing joy to immeasurable beings. So the truth is that at the time, I thought that was pretty hokey. But that wasn't the first time that I thought something was hokey. and then it turned out actually to be really good. That was a great instruction. That was an overwhelmingly great instruction. So he said every day, do it every day. After the first day and a few other encounters with this person, I just started doing it every day. I still do it every day. I find somebody who I don't know and I make some connection. In the supermarket, I like to say, I usually ask, where's the soap? I don't know why. That just stuck. It was kind of easy to use, you know? So I'd say, where's the soap? And without exception, oh, I don't know where it is, but I'll ask somebody. There's always something going on there. And then there's a little exchange, and it's over. And I always try to say something or do something that will be a cause for at least something pleasant, if not really joyful. And it occurs on 100% of the time so far, and it's been about 20 years.
So the follow-up when they say, I don't know, but I'll ask somebody, help us understand in a very concrete way how you would follow up, like say a couple of days ago, that would be something pleasurable or joyful. I assume you meant for them, but maybe you meant for you too.
Definitely for them, but if it worked for them, I felt good. That's easy. I haven't had a bad result yet. Like nobody has ever said, soap, bug off. You know, it's like I've never had anything like that happen. But now that it's in the air, I'm sure it's just right around the corner. Can we put that one back in the bag?
Yeah.
My favorite one, which some people here know, but I'm going to say it again anyway, just that it's boring, was standing in a line in the supermarket, having not actually made a connection with anybody, and sometimes, you know, trying to be creative, like what could you do that would be better than what you're thinking about? And then pretty soon I find that I'm looking at the checker, and she looks miserable. She's looking like there's nothing good about today. And so I get up there and I just completely space out saying or doing anything. I'm thinking I need to say something to her. This is like a good one. But it doesn't happen. The line goes by, and I'm looking at my receipt, which I don't know why. I've always had the habit of, you look at the receipt. I think it was because once I was overcharged by a fairly large amount, and then it was just gone. So I always look at the receipt. I look at the receipt, she overcharged me 80 cents. So my first thought is, 80 cents, you know, it's not worth the trouble, especially for somebody who's having a bad day. Then I take about 2 steps, and I think to myself, no, this is it. This is my chance today. So I go back and I say, I'm sorry, I think you overcharged me 80 cents. And I'm just thinking, you know, it's like I'm happy to just let it go. She said, no. But because it's already gone through, you have to sign something. So she also had to sign something. So when she signed something, I looked at it. It looked like extraordinary calligraphy. I said, is that your name? And she said, my name. I can't remember her name, but she said, is that she said, yeah, that's my name. And I said, that is amazing. Like, here we are on this line, and I'm looking at this thing, and this was extraordinary calligraphy. For those of you who know, Sanjay, who's a great calligrapher, really, it was like that. It was just amazing. Anyway, the long and the short of it is that she said, you have to wait a little bit while I go and get the thing that you need to sign for 80 cents. It's a lifelong contract. And she comes back, and I'm still thinking, this is like a thing here. You know, I got to work this thing somehow. And so other people started looking at her handwriting. pretty soon there were 5 or 6 people who were all saying, "That's amazing. Hey, would you sign my name like that?" And pretty soon it's like she's signing other people's names on things so that they could see it, and more flourishes and all. And in the midst of all of that, she totally broke down and started crying. She leaves the place. She says, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." It was clear it was just overwhelming her somehow. And she comes back maybe 3 or 4 minutes. It was quite a while. And when she came back, then she apologized. She said, "I'm really sorry. I hope everybody said, no, it's okay. It's totally okay." But that's how that happened with that. She said nobody has ever mentioned my calligraphy. She was about 40, I'd say. Hard to believe somebody would never mention it, especially since she probably wasn't a professional calligrapher. But and it's hard to imagine at this point, like, what could be so unusual about that, but it just was somehow. So that was good. That was a good day. I call that a good day anyway. I think that what we say is that you can sit in a cave for 50 years and totally come to recognize the nature of mind itself, but there is no joy in that. The joy comes, like Milarepa, for example, the joy does not come from the realization. The joy comes from your relationship with others. But the relationship does not have to be hands-on relationship. It can be the intention and the understanding that you actually are benefiting others. So that's my theory of cave dwellers, that the joy does not come from the personal insight. Not to say there's no joy in that, but the real joy is the joy that you give to others. So I think in that way, we have that opportunity at least once a day, if not many times every day. Okay? Is that good enough? We have about 10 minutes if there's anything more. You want to hear another story? It's a joy story that actually manifests in a way which should have been the exact opposite. There was a visiting teacher who visited when I was living in San Francisco, and we ended up spending about 2 weeks together every day, and he was looking for I think it's what's called a left-handed conch shell. Does anybody know what that means? It means that it turns in a certain way. The spiral goes in one direction as opposed to the other one. So he was looking for, I think he called it a left-handed conch shell, to give to the 16th Karmapa, who's dead now, and he had me driving him all over the place. We could not find a left-handed conch shell, and I said, you know, are they expensive? And he says, oh yeah. He says it costs about $1,000 for that. But he was determined to get this thing as a gift. So we go into the museum attached to, in San Francisco, it was the DeYoung Museum. I think it was in a kind of a souvenir shop or something that was attached to it. And so we went in there to find the left-handed conch shell. And so he asked, there was one woman there behind the counter, and he asked her, do you have this thing? And they had to talk about it a little bit. She didn't know what it was. And probably I think that was a language issue also. So she gets us, she's got like 20 or 30 conch shells on this high shelf. and they did not get off to a good relationship start. She's saying, which one is it? Well, of course, they're like way too far away to see. And he says, I can't tell which one it is. Do you have a ladder? Yes, but I'll have to go up. So I'm immediately thinking like, oh man, this is not going to go well. I can see. So she went up. She was probably 70 years old. She was pretty old and really cranky also. Really cranky. And so she would bring it down, and she'd show him one, and he'd say, no, it's not quite right, it's this. So she'd go up and get another one. She'd take that one back, put it back, get another one, bring it down. So that went on for 3 or 4 times. And then she just, I remember her like, she let out a big gasp and a moan, and she just brought all the conch shells down. And she was really fuming at that point. And she's kind of pushing them at him. It's like they were having a little aggressive thing going on there. And he suddenly leans over the glass counter, like way over, such that her face, which was before like 2 feet apart, he like came up like this, like 2 feet apart. And he says, why are you so crazy? Just like that. Just like that. Well, I thought, oh man, where's the back door? The exact opposite happened. For no explicable reason. I cannot imagine why it happened, but she suddenly became totally interested in finding him this conch shell. Like devoted to it almost. She took every conch shell. She ultimately found him a conch shell. It was also had a problem, so he didn't get it. But in the meantime, she was giving him everything that she had to offer. I mean, she got him tea, she got lunch. It was like all this stuff came. And they were there for about 2 hours talking like they were just old friends. And when he left, I remember she said, will you be back? And he said, probably not. And it was just it was such an interesting encounter. I'm sorry? Yeah.
Connection.
Yeah.
Connection.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, the whole thing was like just totally sweet. Really nice. Personally, I would not try that. Well, shall we have a session of...
One more.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So we had a bit of a discussion earlier about the hell realms, and you've taken us into these wonderful, joyous places. So I feel slightly reticent taking us kind of back back to that spot. But you know, there was a young friend of mine recently who died by suicide.
She died.
She died, and by suicide, and by suicide, yeah. And her parents, understandably, and many of us experienced that as something which probably, as our friend here was describing, probably felt pretty much like a hell realm. I mean, it was something where you know, it's hard for that to happen and not to feel like you want to lean in and grasp something, which was her and she's not here any longer, or to push away and feel aversion towards something that you didn't want to have happen. And so a lot of the kind of patterns that we somehow then put ourselves into are ones where our minds are desperately clinging in one direction or pushing back in another. And I would describe them as very much experiencing something that looked pretty hellish from my perspective. And as they were grappling with this, a lot of what was happening was there were lots of kind of suppositions getting made. So there were a lot of assumptions that were going in. Well, she must have been experiencing this, or there must have been that going on, or there must have been something else going on. And all those thoughts, they were like little kind of clefts on a cliff face. You'd kind of think that, and then that one would crumble away, and then mind would try and put something else in place, and all of them felt pretty shitty, and they all kept crumbling away. Many months later, this young person's cell phone was returned by the police. And so her father got to see her final photographs that she took. And she was smiling. And she was happy. And she was in a very grounded and a place that they had never imagined that she possibly could be. And so something dissolved. Some of those hell experience realms dissolved. And if you looked back, you'd say, well, you know, there were lots of assumptions. Mind was desperately filling in a whole bunch of kind of blank spaces of things that were seemingly beyond comprehension and beyond something that they could feel comfortable with. That there was such a radical impermanence there that it was something that they couldn't rest, you know, peacefully with. And so mind just kept trying to fill in all the blanks. But yet, underneath all of that, when finally, you know, the sense of where this young woman had actually been, which was visible on her phone, there was no hell in that sense, or at least what they had assumed was the case simply wasn't the case, for as best that they could tell. And so this funny kind of way in which hell seems to be something which mind creates, I think that's what you were trying to say, that it's something in our response to an experience where the hell gets created by our clinging on and our pushing away, because we're still not able to relax enough into kind of, understandably in this circumstance, but finding a place that ultimately could be still and accepting and comfortable in a place of very radical impermanence. That without being able to do that, and that's what I found this practice has been so helpful with, but without being able to do that, hell was something that we created and imposed for ourselves. So anyway, I didn't really have a question with it, but as Judith was talking, that sense of kind of like that the hell realm was something that somehow we're capable of mind creates for us somehow. I don't know. Anyway. But isn't necessarily like it's another of those suppositions, another of those fabrications that we have weaved in for ourselves. It had nothing to do with young Claire at that point in time.
Has nothing to do with what?
With the young woman at that point in time, in that sense.
I think it's pretty normal for human beings to make whatever effort is necessary in order to have a sense of understanding. It's just normal to do that. And then, as we know, we've all heard lots of assumptions that we've made and that others have made, and sometimes they ring true to us, and sometimes they don't. And of course, when somebody has died, they don't get a chance to let us know what their judgment would be. But I think it's just normal to have like a firestorm of assumptions and judgments about things. And often, of course, they end up resulting in all sorts of like really terrible conflicts, especially when there's been a suicide. So I think if there's an issue to raise there, it's that one of the teachings that is fairly ubiquitous within Buddhist culture is that when someone dies, their experience of things is amplified, kind of like made more strong. So whatever their experience of something might be in the context of taking one's own life or just dying, the experience is more intense, like way more intense. So along with that, then, we also say, therefore, it's especially important to have a very peaceful environment, if at all possible, for that person, so that as they move from one state to another, they're not burdened by at least things beyond their own mind. And this is like they can have some peace. It's possible, therefore, to say very kind and helpful things and be heard as in a peaceful environment. More likely that would happen. Other than that, a lot of suffering, suicide. Maybe even many times much more suffering for the people who are left than for the person who took their own life. Really hard. Is that okay? Thank you. So why don't we take 15 minutes, let's say, and do a
This is wrong.
That's what time it is. Well, this is wrong. Of course.
3. Yeah, this clock stopped or something. It was right at 2.
You did that, didn't you?
I'm sorry. Your watch is correct.
What is the matter with you?
I kept looking
Speak
at it
up.
going, wow, time seems so slow. And it actually stopped moving
Yeah.
a half hour ago.
It's actually 3 o'clock, right?
Yeah. 2:30.
2:30.
It has said that for a half hour.
Yeah.
And I kept going, wow, how is time doing this? My perception must be way off. Okay, anyway.
But
it's
we
3.
believe clocks. I mean,
Yeah, but that's why I looked at this one. And then, okay, it's 3 o'clock. So, whatever. What do you want to do? And have a break.
Yeah, let's have a break. That's what we'll do. Dedicate?
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.